All right, let's go ahead and get started. My name's Sarah Patterson, and I'm with Who's Well, which is a part of UVA HR. And today we are going to learn about wise use of credit. So I have Cassandra Riggin, who is with the UVA Community Credit Union, where she serves as a community relations officer. So before I hand it over to her, I just want to go over a couple technical things. The first one is that you'll see two different features, the Q&A and the chat. So we just want to reserve the chat feature for any kind of technical issues that you're having. But if you have any questions, please go ahead and use the Q&A feature for that. If you prefer to do it anonymously, you certainly can go ahead and select that option when you're entering a question. And then if somebody asks a question that you're particularly interested in, you can actually upvote the question or comment so that we can move it forward to go ahead and let everyone know that this is an important topic to you. So those are just two of the couple housekeeping items. Again, Q&A is for questions, and then the chat feature is for technical issues. So we hope that you've taken a look at our virtual expo, and UVA Community Credit Union is a Diamond sponsor. So certainly check out the information that we have loaded into there for you to look at. And then you also have many options for raffles as well, and one of those being from UVA Community Credit Union. So I will go ahead and hand it over to you.
Excellent, thank you. Sarah, just double check, you can see the presentation, correct?
Correct.
Excellent, okay. I always like to just have another set of eyes on that. All right, so thanks everybody for joining me. We're going to talk a little bit today about why credit is so important and how you can improve your credit, how to use it to your advantage, kind of what to look for. So just let me get the legal out of the way. We have to do this. It's for information purposes only. Your individual circumstances may vary, so make sure you check with an advisor if you are in a very specific situation. And actually, the credit union does offer free financial coaching. So if you are interested, we would be happy to go over and do a credit report review or a budget review with you. We will have a couple of handouts on today's session, and those can be found on the uvacreditunion.org UVA benefits vanity page, which we created a link for. You can use the hyperlink on the tile for the information, and we hope you might find a couple of those handouts helpful. We will be talking today about how credit scores are calculated, how you can improve your credit, a little bit about debt management and how to pay off debt if you do find yourself in financial distress. So there's a lot of ground to cover. So what is credit? People realize that credit is a convenience that allows you to purchase typically large ticket items in advance. So as a convenience item, there can be a cost to credit. It has a lot of advantages. You can use the item while you're paying for it. If you have an emergency, it's a great tool to use, but you also have to watch because there may be some disadvantages. Sometimes it's easy to get in over your head with credit. It may be easy to lose track of spending, especially sometimes when stores offer you the quick approval at the counter. If you get our card, you'll get 20% off, and then you end up with like 50 retail store cards. So it's really important that you kind of keep on top of that and maybe watch falling for some of those little ploys that they have. So another advantage of, why is it stuck? There we go. So with credit, you have a few different types of credit. You have installment credit, which as you pay down, it goes away. So that might be like a car loan, a mortgage loan, a personal loan. You use it and pay it down. Student loans also. Then you have revolving credit. These are things that are typically open-end lines of credit. And so if you pay it down, you can go back and draw from it again. And the biggest example of that is probably like a standard credit card, retail credit cards. You also have home equity and personal lines of credit. Those are revolving items as well. when you're using revolving credit, it's important to remember that different uses have different rates. So for instance, if you charge and make a purchase on a credit card, you may pay a different interest rate than if you do a cash advance. Same thing with other items like a home equity or personal equity, a personal line of credit. The draw, you may have certain requirements. Maybe you have to draw $1,000 out of your home equity line. So it's really important to understand what product you're using and how it works. Typically, when we're talking about credit, if you have a product that is revolving, open-ended, you're going to pay a little bit higher interest rate than if you have a closed-ended product, unless there's equity involved, like equity or collateral. So if we have your car or home or a big piece of collateral, you're typically going to pay less interest than if you have an unsecured form of credit. You also have credit that is like a service contract, short-term loans, and high interest. So the short-term advances and the high interest credit, those are the things that we really want you to avoid. Those would be things like payday lenders or finance companies. Things that, like if you say quick cash, fast cash, not a lot of hoops to jump through for approval. Those are all actually kind of warning signs that that credit may be something kind of predatory. So you may pay a really high interest, especially like the short-term payday advance loans. You may pay up to 800% annual percentage rate on a payday advance loan because it's known as a short-term type of product. So when they give you the interest rate, they may say 20%, but it's 20% per day. So you really have to look at that APR. A lot of people get short-term loans and end up rolling them over. So it's kind of a trap that you can fall into. So we really want you to watch getting into business or possibly getting into trouble with that type of credit. So credit cost depends on a lot of different things. Depends, again, like we said, who you're getting the credit from. Typically, like a bank or a credit union, you may pay lower interest than you would at a finance company or a place like that. It depends on how much you borrow, how long it takes you to repay the debt. Money is math, right? Numbers adding, subtracting. So if you borrow a bigger amount, 10,000 over 1,000, it's going to cost you a little bit more. If you keep the money for 5 years versus 1 year, it's going to cost you a little bit more. And it depends on the type of credit you're using. But one of the biggest factors that goes into what credit costs you is your credit history. Most lending now, they use something called risk-based pricing to determine how that's going to impact your rate. And we'll take a look at how big an impact that has in 1 second. So really, everybody needs good credit. It's something that's really important. It kind of bleeds into things in your life that you wouldn't think it would. For instance, car insurance companies actually pull your credit report to kind of get your rates. Employers, before you apply for a job, will pull your credit report. So it's important that you know what's on your credit report and you make sure that it's accurate and the information in there is actually yours. So this is kind of the impact slide. If you have poor credit, let's say you have a score between 500 and 589. If you want to borrow $25,000 for a new car for 60 months, with a low score, you might be paying an APR of about 16.80% annual percentage rate. That's going to give you a monthly payment of $619, $12,115 total interest you pay over the loan if you pay every payment on time, every time. If you have A credit, you're paying 3.82. Same car is going to cost you $458 a month. You'll pay $2,502 in interest. So having a lower score impacts you about $10,000 worth. So it's really, really important that you work on your credit score and try and get it up as much as possible. If you are in a situation where you have struggled with your credit a little and you need to work on it, do that. Like, continue to get your score up and try and refinance. So even if you can get your score up from the 590 range to the 690 range, you're going to save yourself a lot of money over the term of the loan. You're not stuck with a low interest rate, a high interest rate loan. You can try and get it refinanced to get a better rate for yourself. So it's something that you really need to stay on top of, because it's real dollars. It's coming out of your pocket. So how do people know what your credit looks like? There are three main credit bureaus. You have Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. So these bureaus collect data about how you pay your bills. And basically, they're for-profit businesses. They sell your information and they make money. That's kind of how they make their dime. So one of the things that you can do is you can visit optoutprescreen.com. That will, if you opt out, prevent the bureaus from selling your data. And I highly recommend you do this, because it won't prevent you from applying for credit. It just means that all those pre-approved, pre-solicited credit card offers you get, you'll stop getting those, which is great, because that opens you up for a little bit of risk of identity theft, and you get those pre-approved offers in your mailbox. And then you have more control over the information that's out there. The more your information is out there, the more it's at risk. So by opting out, they're not allowed to sell your data and send it to companies that basically just pay the fees. So it's a really good thing to do. I highly recommend it. If you visit optoutprescreen.com online, you can opt out. It takes about 5 minutes. It's good for 5 years. After that 5-year term is over, they'll send you a letter that says, like, hey, if you're serious about opting out, you have to send us a letter in writing, and then you can permanently opt out, because they know you're lazy and might not write a letter like me. My opt-out expired a while ago, so I've got to get pen to paper and mail them a letter so I can opt out permanently. But it's just a nice thing that you can do to protect your information a little. And the less your information's out there, the better off you are. Doesn't prevent you from getting your own credit report. You can go ahead and order that at annualcreditreport.com. This is the only FTC approved source for your free credit report. It's provided by Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion directly. There's a tip sheet on the website that I told you about earlier that tells you how you can pull that credit report online. You're going to need some basic information. They're going to ask you a few security questions. You obviously want to be on a secure server. By law, you get one free credit report a year from each of the big three bureaus. So it's really important that you order all three, because not every creditor reports on every bureau. So what's on TransUnion might not be the same thing that's on Equifax. So you really need to look at all three. And actually now during the COVID crisis, as you can see, credit reports are free through April 2021. So this is actually a really good time for you to take advantage of that and get your credit reports, kind of have a consistent view of them. So what's in that credit report? It's going to have your identifying information, your name, addresses where you've lived, social security number, you've had maiden names, information of that nature. But what's interesting about credit bureaus is the information the creditors report based on your name and address. It's not reported based on your social security number. So if you have somebody with a similar name in your household, like especially men with a junior-senior situation, you could end up with credit bureau overlap. So it's really critical that you check. We actually had a member that sold their house to somebody that had a similar name, same last name, and their credit bureaus got mixed up. So it's really critical that you take a look at that. Credit bureaus may have your job history. Like I said, employers check your file and sometimes they'll ping that and report on your bureau. So that's a good time to check. And especially if you see employers that you don't recognize, that could be a red flag that something's going on. The biggest chunk of your credit bureau, of course, though, is going to be your payment history. How have you paid those bills? They typically give you a 2-year snapshot of your payments. It could go back further. That varies by bureau, but those are the most impactful items, typically the last 2 years. If you have negative information on your bureau, when you pull your credit report, it's going to show 2 sections. It's going to show the potentially negative items, and that's typically up front. And those are going to be the things like, paid 60 days late, had a charge off, maybe a bankruptcy. Things like that stay on your bureau for about 7 years. So it's critical that you take a look and make sure that everything on there is accurate. But it also gives you good information when you pull your consumer report. It'll give you an estimated drop-off date. So it'll say this information will fall off of your report or will, be deleted on this day. And mentally, that's a good thing to know. So you can kind of say like, okay, I may have a negative item, but it's going to kind of go away and I should get a little bump on this date. So one thing though that we want to warn you about is if you have something negative on your bureau, let's say you have a charge off or a collection item. It's been on your bureau for about 5 years. So let's say you want to address the item. If you have a workout agreement with a collector or someone that has reported on you, before you make any payments, you want to get them in writing to make sure that they agree that they will report paid as agreed as soon as possible, or update your file to match that payment. Because sometimes what happens is if you make a payment on it, not pay it off, but make a payment, it triggers another 7 years. So it's 7 years from the date of last activity. So if you have a negative item and it's been on there for 5 years and then you make a payment, that could trigger that to stay on another 7 years. So just kind of be careful about that and plan for that when you're talking to any creditors to try and pay that item off. So legal action also shows up. Bankruptcies, if someone has sued you civilly and won a judgment. Inquiries. This is who is looking at your file. So the only people that can really pull your file are people with a business need, a reason to, or anytime that you apply for credit. Somebody that you're currently doing business with can pull your file at any time. So let's say you have a UVA Community Credit Union credit card. We can pull your file just to check and see if we want to raise your credit limit or maybe in some cases lower it. So it's important that you take a look at who's looking at your information, because that's also another place where you could spot a red flag for identity theft. Let's see, say you have a lot of inquiries on that file and you don't recognize them. That shows or could be a sign that someone is applying for credit in your name. So when you see the inquiries, it's going to show inquiries that you initiated. That means you applied directly for credit. Those are the inquiries that ding your credit score. If you did not initiate an inquiry, those are the things that are sent to you that are pre-approved offers. You didn't apply for them, you didn't ask for them. Those were the things that I was saying that you could opt out of. So those don't ding your credit score, but they'll show up as an inquiry on your file. And inquiries typically show for about 2 years. Again, when you order your consumer file, it's got a lot of great information, but the one thing that everybody wants to know that's not on there, unfortunately, is your credit score. So that is not on your credit bureau. A whole other company called FICO, Fair Isaacs Corporation, came up with an algorithm. They said, hey, we're going to take all the information from credit bureaus and we're going to calculate just a number. So poor lenders won't have to pour through 20 pages of your credit file we'll just give them a number that predicts how likely it is that you're going to pay your bill. So FICO, you can buy your FICO score. You get an estimate free from some credit card companies. You can Credit Karma. Some places like that offer something like a FICO score. It's not exact, but it's a close representation. But when we're talking about credit scores and FICO scores, really most of them have the same components. They look at the same things. 35%, or the biggest portion of how your score is calculated, is based on how well have you paid your bills in the past. And this makes sense if you look at it from the perspective of, you know, if you haven't paid your other bills, why would we think that you would pay us back? So that makes sense. 35%, that's the biggest chunk. The next biggest chunk is amounts owed. 30% is based on your utilization ratio. And this just means of all your available credit, are you carrying a high balance? So let's say you have a credit card with $1,000 available credit. If you have a balance of $600, your utilization ratio, your usage is high, 60%, your credit score is going down. It's hurting you. If you want your credit score to trend up, you have to get your utilization ratio to about 30%. So you don't want to carry a balance of more than $300. Now this is carry a balance. So if you're the type of person, and we do this from time to time, like we may charge something up on our credit card, maybe buy furniture or something, and then pay it off in full. So we might have a high balance, but then it drops down as soon as we pay our bill. And the same thing next month, maybe we go up and down. As long as you're paying most of that off, they can see that pattern as well. So that's not going to hurt you. It's when you carry that balance, that's when that's going to impact you. So the next thing is your length of credit history, 15%. So how long have you had credit? So this is also where some people may get into a little trouble, and credit hop is what we call it. So let's say you have a credit card, a Visa, you got the intro rate, no interest, or 2% or something really low, and then that runs out, you close that and you get another card. So if you're doing that, you're not getting anything with that length of credit history on your file. So it's really important that you have one credit card that I want you to think of it as a long-term relationship. Like my one card I've had since I was in college. I had it before I got married. I'll have it, heaven forbid, after. Like if something goes south, I'll still have that credit card. It's the oldest thing in my file. I don't have anything else that can match that length of credit history. But if I were to close it, I would see a little ding in my score because of that. So it's really important that you have one thing that establishes that length of credit history. 10% is calculated based on credit applications. Are you applying for credit like a maniac? Like nobody likes the stink of desperation. You don't like it, we don't like it. So if we see that you're applying, we're like, something's up. Why are they applying for all that credit? So if you're trying to get your score to trend upwards, stop applying, right? Keep it to one application, maybe every 6 months or so, with the exception of auto loans and mortgages. And what happens there is typically people rate shop for those things. So the credit bureau, if you're applying for an auto loan, sometimes the dealer, I don't know if you're aware of this, but sometimes the dealer, if you fill out their application, they'll shoot that through to about 10, 15 lenders. So that's 15 people that pull your file in one go. So the bureau actually bundles those and counts that as one inquiry. So that helps with the new credit application. So 10% of your score is what's your credit mix? Are you using all types of credit responsibly? So if you have all credit cards see if you can get an installment loan of some kind, mortgage, an equity line, something different to get that mix going, and that impacts your score. It's a small percentage, it's 10%, but it's something that you want to be mindful of. And one big mistake that people make is if they're applying for something big, like a mortgage or a car, they may look at those cards and close something before they apply. They think, well, I'm not using these cards, I'll go ahead and close that. But what happens sometimes when you close a card is that it lowers your score. Maybe temporary, but it lowers your score. Then you're going into the mortgage application process with potentially a little bit lower score, which means you may pay a higher rate. So before you apply for any loans, don't close anything, right? What happens if you apply and we see something on there that we don't love? We'll say, hey, we'll give you the loan, but you have to close this credit card or pay this off or do whatever. We'll tell you that. So you don't have to do that in advance. If you're in a spot where you have too many like retail cards or any cards of that nature, it's great. You can close one of those out, but don't do that around the time you're applying for credit. And make sure that you're keeping that length of credit history in mind. Like try not to close your oldest cards, but maybe the newer ones. So this is just kind of telling you where you're stacking up with your credit score. So most of the population, if you look, over 50%, they have, anywhere between 700 and 850. So that's a pretty good chunk. Then you look in the 650 range to the 550 range, again, a fair chunk that need a little help. And then we have the little bit lower section that I haven't seen very often, but you do see every now and then. If you're in that situation where your score is below a 549, it's tough for you. You have a little bit of work to do, but it's not impossible to come back from that. It just takes a little bit of time. Usually it takes time to get into credit trouble, so it takes a little time to bounce back from that as well. So it's important to think of. So when you're looking at your credit file, make sure you're looking for those errors. There's a handout on our website that tells you how you can report and correct those errors. But basically, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, they all have an online dispute form that you can fill out. It's a little information, and it's really up to you. Be your own advocate, because it's a tough process, and you have to follow up to make sure that they have made those corrections. So let's say you see something on your credit file, maybe a late payment. If you report that and you didn't have the late payment, let's say, if you report that to the credit bureau and dispute it, and they say, oh yeah, we contacted your creditor, we're gonna back that out, you then have to check about 60 days later to make sure that they did back that out, because it happens where they'll sometimes have a finding and not follow through with correcting that. So it really is beneficial for you to keep track of everything that you're doing and make sure that they have adjusted any errors as agreed. So that handout should help you with that. So go ahead and just to recap, to keep a strong score, just keep your balances low, pay on time, don't over apply, and have a good mix. Don't co-sign for people, right? It says be a cautious co-signer, but I say really the only people you should co-sign for are your kids, and even then sometimes make sure you're following up, right? Because when you're co-signing for somebody, you are taking on their debt. It could hurt your credit score, because if they don't pay, it impacts your file. They could come after you legally, or it actually impacts your debt to income ratio. So if you're co-signing for somebody for a car loan, let's say, if you need a car, we pull the file and we see you already have a car loan, we have to assume that you're paying or may have to pay that bill. So that debt goes into your debt to income ratio, and it could impact your ability to get credit. So just be careful with that. Make sure you're reading all the fine print again for everything that you sign, and make sure that if you are in a situation where you're trying to improve your credit, that you have reviewed your report, you're making those payments on time, you've addressed any problem areas. If you have to establish credit and you don't have anything, you can start with something small, like a retail department store card or a gas card. They're easier to get, and make sure they report to the bureaus. But if you use that and pay it off every month, that's going to help. You may need something called a credit builder or a secure card, like a Visa or MasterCard, where you put cash down as collateral. And then you get a credit card. Let's say you put $500 down as collateral, and you get a credit card with a $500 limit that reports on your bureau. But it's important that you know, if you're trying to build your credit and you get a credit, like a secured credit card or a gas card, it's important that you use it and pay it off in full every month, because just having it is not going to get your score to trend upwards as much as if you get that positive payment history going, because that's what we're looking for, that paid as agreed, paid as agreed, paid as agreed, to counteract any negative items on there. And if you start with something smaller, like a small loan, a personal loan, you're more likely to be approved for that than obviously a larger unsecured loan. So just kind of keep those things in mind when you're talking about building or improving your credit. When you're trying to find credit, just make sure that you use credit wisely. Find a credit card that's a good match for you. Make sure you're doing business with the right lender, somebody that gives you hopefully low rates and fees. If you have perks and rewards, that's a great thing to use. Some places offer too affinity cards, where maybe if you are using your card, a certain percentage of that may go to an organization that you support, an alumni group, a charitable organization. So just kind of shop around to find a card that's a good match for you. And like I said, hopefully that's going to be a long-term relationship. You want to keep that in mind. Don't carry a large balance for all of your credit. You want to keep your payments below 20% of your take-home pay, or your spendable income divided by 3. So spendable income is like what you have left over after you pay all of your essentials. So just, again, that's another reminder, just keep your balances low, kind of watch your spending, and avoid the minimum payment trap. So credit card companies are really super nice, right? Haha. They say, if you borrow $2,500, let's say you're charged an 18% interest, you only have to pay us 2% of the balance, or $20, whatever. So if you are only paying the minimum payment on that credit card, basically every month you are really only covering the interest. You're not digging into that principal. And you end up paying, if you're paying the minimum, about 27 years on that $2,500, you'd end up owing about $8,396. So that's a pretty significant amount. So just looking at how you're paying things off can really make a huge difference in how much it costs you, how much money you're taking out of your pocket over time. Let's say you do buy a laptop for $2,500. You don't want it to cost $8,000. Like, that's crazy. So really keep in mind how you're using that, and look for signs of debt distress. Like if you're using one card when you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, that's a bad sign. Sneaking purchases in, going over your card limits, that's dangerous. The other thing about going over your card limit or paying late is that actually triggers credit cards to raise your interest rate. So let's say you have a 13% interest rate on a credit card and you make a late payment, you pay 60 days late, they could say, hey, your 13% is now 26%, and you, of course, paid your late fees. That 26% is going to be there for a while. They're not going to lower your rate back down for quite some time, and typically you have to kind of reapply or ask for that. So don't go over your limit. make sure you're paying those payments on time, because not only does it hurt your credit, but financially it hurts you a lot as well. One of the best things that you can do overall for your finances is make sure that you have a budget, that you know how cash is flowing in and out of your household. You're keeping track of your debt and the interest that you're paying on that debt. So you should know how much you owe in your balance, what your minimum payment is, and what the interest rate is on all of your debt. It's really an important thing to do. And there's a lot of online tools that can help you do that. We have our financial tools program that can help you set a budget, help you keep track of debt, help you set goals. And most financial institutions do. So really check into that. There's some apps. There are a lot of things that you can use. If you're old-fashioned, you can use a spreadsheet or pen and paper, right? Just make sure you're keeping up with that. You know, if you are in trouble with credit, just be mindful of it. And if you are using it for non-emergency reasons, sometimes people use credit. It gives you a little, actually it gives you a little high. Studies show that it gives you like a little rush if you buy something new and then it crashes. So if you do feel like you're using credit for the wrong reasons, really try and get that temptation out of the way. If you saw the movie where the lady put her credit card in a block of ice and was chipping it away at it, whatever works for you, right? Try to stop using credit. Contact your creditors, keep in touch with them. If you are struggling, make sure that you're not avoiding that, because sometimes, especially now, there are some things that creditors are doing to help people, and we want you to take advantage of that. Sometimes changing the way that you pay down your debt also has a huge impact. So money is math. So this is one of the things that I do with people. I'll sit down and help develop a budget and go over debt repayment strategies. Just by changing the way you're paying your bills sometimes can save you, like thousands of dollars in interest over the term. So biggest piece, like I said, set up a budget, take a look at the spending, see if you have any additional money that you can throw towards debt repayment. If you do, the Power Pay principle is going to be the best thing that you can do. This is, you're listing all of your debts with the highest interest rate to the lowest. Then you're going to pay the minimum payment on everything but the highest interest rate, and then pay everything extra you can at the highest item. So you're focusing on the debt that's costing you the most money. So any excess money that you've had from your budget and from your other payments that you've been spreading out, focus on that high interest rate debt. Then you're going to move down the list. After you pay that highest interest rate item, you're going to go down to item number 2, 3, etc. That's my preferred method. Sometimes people use something called the snowball method. Now this can be good if you only have 1 or 2 things with a really small balance. You may want to pay those off just to get them out of the way, and then take that money and snowball it to the next debt that you have. Financially, that one may or may not make the most sense. It depends on what the interest rates are on those items and how that's going. So it's really kind of good to run those numbers before you commit to any repayment plan. Same thing with consolidation loans. Some people get a debt consolidation loan, and that can save you a lot of money. However, it's really important that if you do take out a consolidation loan, that you address how you got into that situation. If it was an emergency and you wouldn't have the same credit crisis again, that's great. Take advantage of that consolidation loan, get one payment for all your bills and focus on paying that off. But if it was, you know, kind of casual spending or impulse buying that got you into that situation, sometimes what we see is people take out a consolidation loan and then they end up charging the credit cards again. So, or getting new cards if they've closed the other cards out. So just be really mindful of that and see what's causing the debt in the first place. Again, some tips in general. Make sure that you have your budget, that you are not co-signing, keeping track of your debt. Be a smart shopper whenever possible. You know, if you can comparison shop, buy things secondhand, use rebates, coupons, clubs, there's all kinds of resources out there for you to help you kind of save money. And if you're struggling right now, like I said, contact your creditors, look for resources online. Hopefully something soon will happen if you are in a situation where you need financial help. Fingers crossed. Online resources that are available, we want you to look into, of course, our website. We have some information. The Consumer FTC has some great information. MyFICO.com can help you with your credit scores. Smart About Money. Oh, I have my FICO on, sorry, twice. It's doubly important. So it's really important that you also, besides listening to stuff like this, that you kind of do some research on your own. Pull your credit file, make sure you know what's in there, work on those strategies to try and improve that score, and use additional resources. So take advantage of resources that are out there, resources like the credit union. Like I said, we do free budgets for people. So we'll meet with Zoom and just go over and help you formalize your budget and debt repayment plan, and then move on to savings, because that's another question people get a lot. I get a lot of times people will say, like, should I focus on savings or paying down my debt? And aside from your 401k, 403b plans, which you should hopefully all be participating in, then savings is important, but you need to pay down that debt first, because the debt is costing you money and your savings is not typically earning you very much right now. I think savings accounts are earning like 0.0 nothing, but you may be paying 18% interest on a credit card. So it's important to address that debt and then focus on a sound savings strategy. So it's something that, you know, we can take a look at with you if you need help. We're happy to help you out with that. So that was a lot of information in a short little time. Anybody have any questions? I don't see anything.
I don't see any questions right now. I will say UVA Community Credit Union is also doing another presentation on Thursday. It's at 3 p.m. and it is titled How to Qualify for a Mortgage. So please definitely join in on that as well, or any of our other presentations that we have going on throughout the week. And I do see one question that came in. How do you pull a report?
Great. So you visit the FTC has a link to pull your credit report, the Federal Trade Commission, or annualcreditreport.com. You can go directly there. There's a tip sheet, like I said. If you use the link to get to the UVA, we have created on our website a landing page for the UVA Benefits Fair, and it has the 2 handouts that I referenced in this seminar. So that's a tip sheet that kind of walks you through how to pull your credit report. But it's really easy. You visit annualcreditreport.com. They'll say, which credit reports do you want? Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion. And you can order all 3 at once, or you can stagger your requests. But right now, since they're free, order them all, take a look at everything. Okay.
So we have another one that's come in. I have a question about credit reports. I recently got my reports and one item says something to the effect of not enough information about when this was late. How do I get something like that off my report that isn't about a specific item?
So that's a great time to, one, do a two-pronged attack on that. I would definitely contact the creditor directly. So whatever that's reporting under, contact them and file a dispute with the Bureau. Because if they can't definitively show that that item was late, they have to have proof, then they have to remove it. So you're entitled to know what they're basing that on. So that's a situation where I definitely file a dispute. And again, that's on the handout page that we have. You can use the link on our tile on the benefits page to get there. but it'll talk you through how you can fill out the dispute form. But basically, whatever bureau it's showing up on, whether it's Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion, you'll go and fill out the dispute form with that bureau. So if it's on Equifax, go through the Equifax website, disputes, and that'll pull up. So, and make sure you stay on top of it. If they're going to remove it, like I said, stay on top of it, check, and make sure that they did remove it, because that's also a problem. Thanks. Thank you.
All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Virtual Expo and the resources that are located under UVA Community Credit Union, who's also a sponsor of our expo as well.
Yep, that's where you get those handouts. Use that link to get to the page. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.